Hi, I'm Tara from the Marathon Mates. On this episode, we'll be joined by our good mate, Steve Marsden. Steve loves running his trails and getting involved at Parkrun. On this episode, we will hear all about Steve's running journey, as well as hear about what it takes to be a Parkrun ambassador. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the flying runner, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 76 of The Flying Runner. Tonight we are joined by Steve Marsden. Tim and I first came across Steve probably about 10 years ago at our local parkrun at Bunyaville. Since then we've gotten to know Steve quite a lot more over the time. Tonight you will hear about Steve's running journey as well as his love of parkrun and how it led him to the ambassador role. In addition, we will talk about his trail running adventures and also talk a little bit about how he manages to keep his running going and amongst his many work commitments. But before we do any of that, let's welcome Steve to the show. G'day, Steve. How are you?
Good, thanks, Tara. Thanks. Lovely to be here.
Thanks, Steve. And as always, I'm joined by my marathon mates, Lucia, Tony, and of course, Tim. Guys, how are you? And most importantly, how's your running been going over the last week or so?
Well, it's in Sydney, the summer's definitely arrived. So, what was meant to be a 10K on Sunday, I stopped at 9 and I'm like, nah, I'm done. It was just the humidity. It's just been an absolute killer. But I'm very excited because I've got all my races locked in for next year. Still may add another one or two. So now I actually, like, after realizing what I've got coming up, I'm like, maybe I should actually start building up the Ks again. So I feel like the oomph has come back, which is good.
Excellent. And Tony, what about you? Did you get to parkrun this week?
I got my first park run done since August, I think it was. The last one I did, August 24. Yeah, it was good. I went down to Cleveland. It's always a nice little park run down there. Just ran around. I really enjoyed it because there was a young father and a young daughter that were running it, and they were just like so steady with their pace. And I when we were coming home, it's an out and back and you're coming home, I started just talking to him and he was pacing his daughter for a PB, and I just thought it was just so lovely. And then 500 meters from the finish line, she just had to stop and walk, didn't she? So, and he was just so patient, said, okay, we can do that. And so it was just really wonderful to see. It really does bring out the joy in what we do. But what I also found interesting was because I was going to let them finish in front of me and just do their thing, and I was just excited for them. But when they stopped, obviously I had to come around. I thought, well, let's see how quick I can go towards the finish. And then this guy who had been tailing me the whole time decided that was his time to put in his burst and try and beat me across the line. I've never had that ever before in my life. And I think the good people down there at Cleveland Parkrun said it was a dead heat. So I'm happy with that. So, yeah, it was good. It was good. And then on Saturday, of course, we started running for the Big Kahuna, which is the virtual set of runs that are linked to the Honolulu Marathon. As a family, we got out really early. Tim and Sharon went their way. I went my way. We all finished well before 7 o'clock, and we were soaked. So just with sweat, and even then it's just so hard. So I've got the next 2 weeks, I'm going to do 2 15s to sort of now start building towards that virtual marathon. I'm going to do it in 3 separate runs, 2 runs of 15, and then I'll do the 13K for the resolution run as the last piece of the marathon. And just in between that, I'm going to do the Merry Mile, which is another one of the virtuals. So I'll knock them all over. But yeah, it's good to have the virtual. So it was a good weekend. Feeling good.
Are you changing your mind on virtuals, Tony? I do recall an episode some time ago we did on virtuals, and it wasn't your cup of tea.
No, it wasn't. But I think this one just sort of piqued my interest. Because I want to run Honolulu, and that's sort of in the back of my mind as 2026. I want to do that. But it was just, I think what we needed at this particular time of year, it came at the right time. Otherwise, like, we're still in light training. So I'm not deadly serious about times. I think I did the 10 there on Sunday in an hour 15. So we're still just taking it easy, but it just makes sure that we're keeping some miles in the leg. I'm breaking my marathon into 3. Sharon, I think, is breaking hers into 7 or possibly 8. So you're allowed to do it over multiple days. So why not, I say. Hey, and just before I pass back to you, I found it interesting because I did watch the Merry Mile Elite race, and I found 2 things I found really interesting. The Merry Mile was an out and back, so it started at a park and then ran out, I'm presuming, half a mile, and then came back along the main beach drag of, I think it must have been Waikiki. But so they run the average runners first, right? So there's thousands of them, all walking mostly. I saw the 1 mile, and then they have the elite race, and the elite race is a combination of the females and the males, and the females start first. And there were some big names, some former Olympians and whatnot. And Ollie Hall from Australia was part of the men's, as was there another Australian. So the women start, and then 32 seconds later, the men start. And it's all about the men trying to chase the women down before they finish the mile. And it was the first time ever a woman or a female, or I should actually say a biological female, because she does identify as non-binary. So in her acceptance speech, she was still saying there's still the first woman still to come. So, but she was a female biologically, and she won the race. And there was a guy who, one of the men, got almost there, but it was such an interesting concept. I've never seen that before in an elite race. So it was exciting.
It's a good way to have a race without having that. Usually as a racer, you're the one at the back being the mediocre runner, whereas you've got the elites chasing you this time. So
yeah, I just found I've never ever seen that before. It was just like a handicap race, and very, very pleasing. And the women were all exceptional. And that 32 seconds waiting for the men to start must have been hell for them, because I know what I'm like. I would have been saying, come on, let's get out there. And but it was a very interesting concept. So Tim and Tara, how's your training been?
Yeah, good. Tim?
Yeah, not too bad. As I said last week, I'm just sitting around getting fat at the moment and relaxing and enjoying life after what's been a busy year. I guess we had my Christmas party, which was a weekend away down at Kingscliff in northern New South Wales. So we did the Kingscliff Parkrun, our very first New South Wales parkrun out of the 430 odd parkruns we've done. We've never done one in New South Wales. So we ventured over the border and got down to Kingscliff, and it's a beautiful out and back. It's along the coastal pathway. It's largely shaded, so at this time of year it's really good. And then once you finish, you literally do what we did, which was jump out into the beach, which is just meters away from the finish line, and go for a swim. So it was fantastic.
It was really nice, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we were a bit too tired to get up and run on Sunday. We just listened to our bodies and said, no, we're not running, probably because we had a decent night out the night before, and decided to just sleep in and rest up before we travelled home later on Sunday. So We've done a little bit of midweek running, but nothing too major, I guess. But yeah, just fattening up and letting the body just do what it does, which is recover and enjoy life, I guess.
Yeah, we had a good time. So Steve, what about you? Did you do parkrun? Obviously, you always do parkrun.
Yes, I was at Bunyaville for the 12th anniversary event on the weekend. So yes, it was a warm one, but grateful for the shade at Bunyaville. But yeah, didn't enjoy the hills.
No, nobody ever enjoys the hills of Bunyaville, but it's the best course still, and it's the friendliest course. So
I don't mind them.
Tim does like them, which is always good. Excellent. So, guys, I guess this is now the time of the week where we hand it over to Tim for the news. Excellent. So, Tim, what's been happening around the world of running over the past few days?
Well, I've got a couple of good news stories there. So the first one is around the incredible Phil Gore. So Aussie ultra marathoner runner and 24-hour oceanic record holder Phil Gore has set a new world record, or a new Australian record subject, a new Australian record subject to ratification recently when he ran at Taiwan's Suzhou 24-hour track invitational in Taipei. Phil ran a total of 270.8 kilometers, setting a new mark. That's 270 kilometers running around a 400-meter running track. To give you an idea of how fast that is a pace of at 5 minute 19 per kilometer average pace for the full 24 hours. So yeah, pretty champion effort from Phil. For most of those who have been in the ultra marathon running game for a while, you would know Phil's name from some of the backyard ultra events. He's one of the handful of people that have ever done 100 yards or more in the ultras, backyard ultras. So an incredible effort from Phil. I don't know about any of you guys, but running 24 hours is hard enough, let alone running round in circles on a 400-meter track, let alone running at 5 minute 19 pace per kilometer. It's just crazy.
No thanks. Funny story. I did some tempo runs on Wednesday night, and I was just doing like a 500-meter segment, then jogging back. The best pace I got to was 5:18. So
there you go. Try doing that now for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But anyway.
Yep. The second bit of news is around Gaut, or as his name is Gaut. He's actually his parents are renaming him based on the actual name that he was given at birth, which is Gaut.
Tim, sorry, can I just interrupt there quickly, because apparently now Gaut, apparently he's actually come out and said, no, call me Gaut. So
okay, that's what he wants.
His parents. He's like, and from what I saw, it's like he kind of wants to be known as that now, which is quite interesting.
Whatever. His name currently is Gaut, whether it's Gaut or Gaut, who knows. But he's currently a 16-year-old. He's just raced in the Australian All-Comers School Track Championships here in Brisbane. He's raised in Australia, born and bred here, but he's of South Sudanese heritage, with his parents immigrating to Australia 2 years ago, prior to his birth. He's a Queensland student at Ipswich Grammar School, which is just out here in, I would call it western suburbs of Brisbane, but Ipswich people call Ipswich a whole city out there. But he's not only just won the 100-meter and 200-meter events, he's set some really incredible times. So in the 100 meters, he ran an unofficial 10.04. It can't count because there was a tailwind. But in the 200 meters, he ran 20.04, breaking the 56-year-old national 200-meter record set back in Mexico Olympics by Peter Norman. Gaut, or Gaut, is the fastest 16-year-old in the world and the second fastest under 18-year-old in global history, which is just phenomenal. The times he is running in the 100 meters and 200 meters are Usain Bolt-like. In fact, he's faster than Usain Bolt at the same age. That 200-meter time that he ran, 20 minutes and 4 seconds, would have placed him 6th in the Olympic final at Paris Olympics. And he's 16 years of age. So it's absolutely mind-boggling how fast he is at 16. And it's hard to think he's only going to get better with age. My only hope, I guess, is that he doesn't destroy himself in the process of trying to get quicker before his body can handle it. So hopefully he's surrounded by the right sorts of people. Hopefully he doesn't get distracted by the dollars and the fame and all the other stuff that comes with these things. And hopefully he can keep running fast and be a worldwide sensation on the running track representing Australia. How about that, guys? But he's ridiculously fast anyway. And they're saying that last 100 in the 200 meters, once he got going, was around about 9.6 or 9.7 seconds, they believe, is that second 100. They don't have official timing on it at this event, but he's quick.
Yeah, he is. He's going to be a legend, and as you say, as long as he's looked after and trains well and allows his body to grow into his speed, I guess it's going to be so exciting.
Yep, he's also picked up a deal with Adidas as well, so who knows what that's worth? But I'm sure Adidas is just rubbing their hands together, going, "They got him." So he is going to be worth a lot of money later on to them if he continues on the same path as Usain Bolt. And the last little bit of news I wanted to go through was everyone's talking about their Spotify Wrapped at the moment. Anyone who's on Spotify would have got during the week a Wrapped session that outlined all their favorite songs and their number one hits and all that sort of stuff through the year. I must admit, and I am going to confess, The Flying Runner wasn't my number one podcast that I listened to.
Oh, Tim.
Maybe because I record it, so I don't listen to it as much. I don't know, but it was my number 2 one. But we have some stats. Obviously, as a broadcaster on Spotify, we get to see the stats associated with Flying Runner, and I'll give you some of those stats right now. The Flying Runner is the number one podcast show for 43 fans on Spotify. I'm not one of them. It is in the top 5 shows for 105 fans. So that's me. I'm in the top 5. The Flying Runner is in the top 10 shows for 132 fans. The show was in the top 10% of video podcasts on Spotify, which is pretty big when you think of all the thousands of video podcasts there are on Spotify. Our listeners aged 55 years and older grew the most by 176% this year. We're streamed in 18 different countries. Obviously, Australia is our top number 1 country. Our podcast episodes were watched 331% more than they were this time last year. And in 2024, we gained 68% more listeners and streamed 382% more content and gained 167% more followers on Spotify. So really good news for us at the Flying Runner. We're growing. We're getting more people listening to us. We're being heard in more countries than ever before. We're putting out more content, which is what Tony's doing on the midweek out and back sessions. So it's been really pleasing to see those results come through. And as usual, we can't do any of this without our listeners and the support we get from our listeners. So thank you to every one of our listeners that is listening to us at the moment.
That has actually got me concerned about how many people are actually watching, and maybe I should actually look a little bit better on a 7 o'clock on a Monday night. It's pretty terrible, actually. Maybe I should actually put a bit more effort in here.
Yeah.
Now, that's it for the news. What's that? Sorry?
I just want to add one more thing. By the time this drops on Friday, the general ballot for the Sydney Mara 2025 will have opened. So it's not a first come, first served. So it opens on the 10th of December, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it closes at 11:59 p.m. on the 30th of December, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And you'll find out if you are successful, and you'll get charged between the 8th and the 9th of January. So basically, if anyone does apply, it's not like it's not like a London or New York in which you have to wait months. It's literally about 10 days. And it's not a first come, first served ballot. So
luck of the draw.
yeah.
Cool.
You know,
I have a feeling most people will get in.
Yeah. Hey, Luke, how good was it to get our confirmations and money coming out of our account? And I was saying to Sharon this morning, it is such a good feeling to know Gold Coast, Sydney, Amsterdam have all been paid for. So
even though I hated last week because I don't want to know how much I spent on race entries, but at least it's pretty much all done now. So I don't have to worry about it next year. Now I can just focus on the training.
Well, Lucia, I can honestly tell you, I've just paid for 9 races just for Gold Coast, and my credit card has got a very nice little dint put into it. So I don't recommend doing the quadruple at Gold Coast and inviting your son to do his first marathon with you at the same time and saying, I'll shout you. It's expensive. Anyway, back to the real subjects. Let's focus on our guest this week. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. As we said earlier, Steve loves his trails and his parkrun. But let's start at the beginning, and I'll ask a couple of questions. So, the first question will be, why did you get into running and when?
Oh, that's a good question, Tara. That was I first started running in my 40s in about 2011 or 2012, and it was my brother's fault. I can blame him. He worked with me at the time, and I think it's funny how things have come full circle. He works with me again now, but he suggested that as an organisation we should all do a Tough Mudder event, and so it was like, oh, right, okay, I better actually get off the couch and do something. So I started running some of our local trails to build some fitness for Tough Mudder. One Friday afternoon, he was sitting in the office, in our home office, and said, there's this thing starting at Sandgate tomorrow called Parkrun. I think we should do it. And I was like, oh, Craig, that's not really I'm not a real runner. There'll be people there that are really fast and stuff. It's like, no, that's the whole point. So he signed us both up. And off we trotted with Ethan, my son, to the launch of Sandgate Parkrun back in, I think that was like late November 2011, I think. And I was like, oh, wow, there's people that just walk the whole 5Ks. And so I did that first parkrun in about 33 minutes walking it, and was hooked and then just slowly built my running journey, just doing 5Ks, then going, okay, do some midweek running, then joined the local Bunyaville trail running group, and then just kind of slowly built from there.
Excellent.
Steve, what's the furthest distance that you've run?
Tony, I like to keep my runs a bit sensible. So I like to finish a run the same day I start it. So, a lot of my friends go, I wasn't a runner in my adolescence or childhood. This is something I've come late to. And I guess I say, I've got not genetically built like a runner. And I could probably do longer, but I don't really want to be running through the night. So my longest event is the Guzzler, which is about just over 50 Ks. It's about 54 kilometres. So I've done that. It's an amazing event in Brisbane. It's a really well organised, great checkpoints, really well marked. It's a really good event. I've done that, the 50K there 3 or 4 times now.
Amazing.
What you failed to admit, though, Steve, is it might be 54 kilometres, but it's the hills that get you on that course. So that actually equates to probably an 80K run.
Yeah, and they're a bit sadistic, the Trailco guys, the organisers of that race, because they've put the worst hill at about the 48 kilometre mark, a hill coming back over the top of Mount Cootha called Kokoda. And it's, I've literally seen people clambering onto trees in tears coming up that hill during the 50K event. It's a tough hill to hit. It's hot by that time of day, even though the event is in July. It's Brisbane, so it's warm. You've got the best part of 50Ks and quite a bit of elevation in your legs by the time you hit that hill, and you've just got this slow grind for, I think it's about 1.5 kilometres long, the hill.
that hill's hard enough at the start of your training runs, and I've done this on training runs, that hill, and it's hard enough at the start when you don't have any distance in your legs and hills in your legs already. So to do it at that distance is very, very tough.
I just there's the year that the course, the 100K course, got altered, and they had to do, because of flooding, and they did 2 loops of the 50K course, so they did that hill twice.
Oh, that
No.
sounds nasty. Now, Steve, out of the many events you've done, what's been your favourite one to date, and why?
Oh, I think the best answer to that is probably the next one that I'm going to do. Look, I think in the modern era, there are so many amazing events, trail and road events, all around Southeast Queensland, Australia. I've done, like a really good event in the high country in Victoria, near where I lived 20 odd years ago, the Buffalo Stampede. That you run off Mount Buffalo and then down into Bright. That was an amazing event. Really tough course, lots of steep descending in the rain, which was awesome. The Guzzler is amazing. The Blackall event is amazing. There's so many good events, but probably a standout event is probably some of the trail running I've done in France. My partner and I are fortunate enough to be in a position where we own an apartment in the Pyrenees in France, and in the village or the town that apartment's located in, there's a really good trail race, really grassroots, kind of organised by a couple of local guys, and the scenery is just stunning. Incredibly tough events. We did the half marathon, Ethan and I, and it's basically 10 and a half kilometres straight up and 10 and a half kilometres down. And it's, so you're climbing for 10 and a half kilometres. You can't even, it's, in Southeast Queensland, where do you find a hill that's 10 kilometres long to train on?
Yeah. And I guess over in France as well, you've got the different weather compared to here. It can be cold, hot. It's just a different environment to be running in as well for you.
Yeah, it's like you get. So I've done a lot of running because we try and go over there kind of every 12 or 18 months. So I've done a lot more running than just the event. And once you get up above the tree line, like there is obviously zero shade. And if it's a warm day in July, it's still hot, and there's no respite from that heat whatsoever. And then you're up in, so we're going to be over there again in summer next year. So the event is growing in popularity a lot. It's called the Aneto Trail Race, Luchon Aneto Trail Race, if anyone wants to look it up. As I said, it's like the Pyrenees are like the more rustic, friendlier version of the French Alps. So it's a lot more low key. It's a lot, one of the main organisers is a guy called Philippe, who is the electrician that did the rewiring of our apartment. He's not, and you just, he's really approachable, and it's just a really low key, really lovely event. But they sold out this year. Actually, on the wait list, I have to pull some favours from Philippe to get an entry. They sold out 2 spaces in under 12 hours. Well, and that's all of their events from the 85. They do have an 85, a 65, 2 45K events, a half marathon, and a 10K and a kids race. Every single one of those races is sold out.
Jeez, crazy.
Running has become very popular, even overseas, obviously.
Yeah. I think trail running is just booming around the world, and it's to try and get in now to something like Mont Blanc or the big races in the States it's so difficult to get in. You've got to qualify. You've got to have qualifying times. You've got to run qualifying events. I think we're lucky in Australia where we don't really have that, with the possible exception of UTA.
Yep. Now, Steve, Tara and I met you more than 10 years ago now at our beloved Bunyaville Parkrun. We know you love parkrun as much as us. How many parkruns have you done to date, and where are some of the parkruns that you've visited around the place?
I think I'm on about 360 odd at the moment, Tim, 366 or something like that.
With a hell of a lot of volunteers as well, I guess.
Yeah, 100 or 150 odd volunteers, maybe something like that. But because I travel for work quite a bit, I do miss a few weeks here and there. So I'm not there, like every single week, like some people are. And yeah, look, again, with travel, I've done some, parkruns all around Queensland. Occasionally with work, it meant things line up and I can squeeze a parkrun in with work. But yeah, I've done bushy parkrun on a bitterly cold UK day where it was -4 or -5. Most parkruns in London were cancelled. Bushy went ahead, and I also did Fountains Abbey parkrun in Yorkshire, which was quite amazing. That was the week before, and it was bitterly cold. I missed, there's a few things where travel has, not quite lined up with things. I missed doing a parkrun in Toulouse, and now, of course, parkrun is paused in France, and looks like it will be for the foreseeable future. And I wasn't in charge of the itinerary when we were in Milan, and we booked a train that was just marginally too early for me to be able to fit parkrun in Milan. But we'll be back in Italy at some point in the next couple of years, and we're traveling to Helsinki next year. So we're going to get a parkrun in Finland.
Oh, nice. So I guess that's the good thing about parkrun. It's always going to be there unless it's in France, obviously, because that one's got a little bit of a concern. But there's always a chance for you to get back somewhere or travel somewhere if you can to do it, which is so nice. So because you have done all these parkruns, you've been an amazing volunteer as well. But one of your volunteer roles is actually as the parkrun ambassador. Can you tell us what is required or what you actually do as a parkrun ambassador? Because you've done event directing and run directing. What's the ambassador role involve?
So there's an event ambassador, and basically that role involves supporting, up around half a dozen parkrun events and just providing support for them if they have any issues or queries. Things like, council might be doing some work on a footpath, so you have to work together with the council and the event team to come up with an alternative course. Disseminating information that might come through from parkrun headquarters. So you just kind of that bit of an intermediary step, and it doesn't mean like events can still contact the parkrun headquarters team directly too if they like, but that you kind of just that support person to be there. And then probably the main other part of the aspect of the role is working with people that have expressed an interest in starting a new parkrun to design and develop a suitable course, because it obviously being like a public event in public spaces every Saturday morning, there's specific requirements around minimising risk around course design. Things like, you can't cross public roads, you can't cross driveways. There shouldn't be like an open drop beside water, for example, like a boardwalk needs to have some sides to it so that, if two people are trying to pass a pram or something like that, that there's an opportunity to be able to step off or something like that without falling into the water. So that's really that ambassador role. It's not a particularly time-consuming role for most events, and most of the events that I've supported have been, amazing event teams, with really good people, and it's been for the most part, a pleasure to work with.
That is a really good environment, the parkrun family, as I like to call it, because you, as an ambassador, you probably get designated, say, 5 or 6 parkruns, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. And as you said, you support all of those park runs and helping the run directors and the event directors to make sure everything goes smoothly as well. So for a setup for a park run, for example, you were doing, I'm assuming you're involved with like Sanford. Would that be correct?
On the sideline. So that there's another event ambassador, Craig, who lives at Sanford. So he was primarily responsible for the Sanford Parklands launch.
Yep. So I guess with those sort of things, with those new launches, you've got to have a certain amount of money, the council approvals and all of that. And that's the sort of thing that you're saying as a summary as well for what you do.
Yeah. Look, and the head office are really supportive in that. Like there's specific volunteers that specialise in their role is identifying and applying for grant. So, because the park run, to start a new park run is about, I could be wrong, but it's in the order of $7,000 to start a park run. That's including to the purchase of the equipment. The most expensive item of that is the defibrillator, and then the insurance costs. And that's a one-off cost for the event startup. So basically that has to cover the insurance costs for the life of that event, which is forever. So yeah, it's a reasonable amount of money to raise, and it can take some events quite some time to raise. And then, you get some people that are very generous and Sanford, for example, had no problem raising that money. Harris Avenue up at Narangba, which I was the event ambassador for, it took that team, 12, 18 months to raise money. They had some local donations from some generous local businesses, and then had to wait for a suitable grant opportunity to arise.
So being involved with Parkrun as long as you have, and I'm guessing that there's probably a number of little funny mishaps or stories along that journey. Steve, are you willing to share any?
I think there's some funny little quirks that, because it was a lot less professional, say, like back in the day. Like I think the very first launch of Kawana Parkrun, they ran the event and then realised it was the course was 300 or 400 metres short. So everyone, set these PBs that were not possible to beat. So they, it was just, I think the story went that the original event director just measured it on her watch or something like that and miscalculated or something like that. Then, and there's like quirks like North Lakes where it's a tiny bit short, that course, but they're kind of constrained with the setup there. Quite a few people, diss North Lakes because it's 3 laps around the lake, but I really enjoy that course. It's one of my favourite events. I was their event ambassador for many years. Fantastic team, and we've played around with trying to make it the just over. The aim is to make a parkrun event just over 5 kilometres, 5,010, 5,020, so that you make sure when you finish, everyone's watches ticked over the 5Ks. But it's exceptionally difficult with the constraints that they've got at North Lakes to find that little bit of extra to make it just over 5Ks.
I knew that course was short. I knew it.
And Tim, the original, the founding event director there, it was similar. There was no, nowadays we go and measure a course with a measuring wheel that's being calibrated and stuff like that. I think he told me, it's quite some years ago now, I think he said he just used, council had marked out a 5K loop around, they'd measured distances around that trail, that track around the lake, and he just used those to mark out his 5 kilometres. So, there's some quirks of history, and I think that's kind of that's part of the appeal of parkrun. That is that it's not like super laser measured accurate, and you do get these little differences and quirks from event to event that are just a little bit funny.
Yeah, or you get an event where the stopwatch hasn't worked properly and everyone gets a time of 59.59, and you come back. You have to come back the following week. Yeah, it's just part of the quirks. You don't pay for it.
Or the timekeeper doesn't start, or doesn't record people as they go through the finish line.
I'm sensing that maybe that timekeeper could have been part of Team Ellis and it wasn't Tim.
Yeah, and it's happened probably more than once too. So, and you know
Tara,
what?
Were you talking at the time?
Definitely not. I don't talk. Definitely not. And it wasn't to Steve at all. No.
My lips are sealed, Tony.
Definitely Tara.
Classic.
And Steve, Tara mentioned earlier that you love your trail running, and our listeners know I'm not a fan of trail running at all. What's one thing that you love about trail running, and how different is it to road running?
I don't look. It depends on the trail. I think it can be really different, but I think it tends to be a little bit like, particularly if you join a trail running group, it's a bit more social than road running. Like road runners are, it's the kind of nature of the game, right? You're pretty, as a generalist stereotype, pretty concerned about what pace you're running and times and stuff like that. Whereas trail running is that little bit more relaxed. It's more about the journey. And that's what I think is appealing to me. I'm not a fast runner. My Instagram hashtag is mid-pack running Marsden. I'm firmly in the mid-pack, and I just think it's that little bit more relaxed. Pace is not so important. I remember taking a friend who was training for the 50K Guzzler as her first significant trail running event, and said, she was training on her own. And I said, do you want to join some friends and we'll do a Mount Glorious loop, which is a, really quite well-known loop, 25K loop around in Mount Glorious in the hinterland of Brisbane. And we all started walking up the first hill, and she was like, "Oh, you guys walk up the hills too?" And it's like, "Yeah, it's only the elites that run up the hills. Everyone else walks." It's like, and it's just that kind of attitude. Look, I also enjoy running on roads as well, but as I'm getting older, I think the trails are softer on my body. Your stride pattern varies on trails, where it's obviously if you're running on a flat path, that stride pattern is very similar over and over and over, kilometre after kilometre. And I think that wears my body, and I'm sorer after a road run than I am after a similar distance on the trails. And it's just, I think there's I think there's quite a bit of research around the benefits of exercise. And when you take that exercise outdoors, there's quite a bit of research to show that those benefits are increased.
Yep, 100%. I find similar things when I'm running on trails. A bit soft under the ground, particularly soft trails. I know in southeast Queensland we have a lot of gravelly, hard, rocky, gravelly, route-bound trails. But when I'm running on the softer trails, it is softer on the body. It is a lot easier. But yeah, it's always challenging. Now, I was going to ask you a question about your favourite trails that you've run on, but I think you've answered that with some of the ones in France and around the place. But I'm going to ask you a different question. I'm going to ask you a question around training. How do you train for like a 50K ultra where you might be running for 8 or 9 hours up and down hills? How do you train for something like that? Because I guess you're not running that far every time when you do a training run.
No. It's very similar to a marathon training in that it's just a slow build, and you might run, because really 50Ks is not that much further than a marathon, and it's just about that same kind of process, like a 3 or 4 month process leading up to that, and just slowly building up. So you might start, depending on where your base is, you might start at kind of 8 or 10K runs, and then just slowly build, add 10-20% to that each week, and then but trying to get in that similar terrain to what you're going to be running on. So if you're running a really hilly race, you obviously need to be training some hills, and I think it's I think it's essential then that you're doing some hill sessions as well during the week, some hill reps, strength work, like every runner, knows that they should be doing it, but none of us do. Well, none of us do enough anyway, right? It's like, will I do strength work or will I go for a run?
Go for a run.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I think some speed work just to build that strength as well and resilience is essential as well. But it's just that slow build. So for a 50K event, I wouldn't run more than, something, 38, 40Ks would be my longest run. And I'd probably be looking, weeks of 80 to 90Ks. But then you go up to the next level and you just scale that up then. If you're doing a 100K event, you probably be wanting to do your longest run of kind of 70, 80Ks. And, when you get into that, though, there's differences of opinion, and it is quite personal. So a good friend of mine, shout out to Chris Bevan, who had a great run at Coast Cozzy a couple of weeks ago, and his longest run in that trainer, that's 242 kilometres. His longest training run in his training block leading up to that wasn't, I think it was less than 80Ks.
Wow.
Yeah, sometimes it's just time on feet rather than distance, I think, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah, 100%. Like in a race like that, there's a lot of hiking in that.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
That makes me think, Tim, we can do the 50, but I don't know about the 240 just yet. So
we're not going beyond the marathon distance, Tara. So
no, like I say,
I'll just hang on to Steve's back and I'll just follow him along now. And he'll just go, no, you talk too much. You're not following me. Steve, I know you're an ecologist and you get to have a look at the flora and fauna as you're trail running as well. So that would be probably one of your big benefits, because you don't get to do that as much road running. I look at the dogs, but being out in the bush and in the trails and stuff, we've found koalas, we've found snakes and stuff like that. You being an ecologist, you'd actually be able to have a look at the tracks and go, oh, that's this one, and know what's going on. What's some of your favourite ones that you have actually found where you've been out and about?
I think, I would like to dispel a myth that you see a lot of snakes trail running. Like, you don't see that many snakes. And I don't, God, all the kilometres I've done on trails, I don't think I've ever seen like one of the big venomous snakes of Australia. You're just making too much noise. They get out of the way well before you arrive. The snakes that you do see tend to be things like carpet pythons and your smaller kind of nocturnal snakes when you're running at night. Like really common in southeast Queensland, you see the eastern small-eyed snakes, which are just a small black-looking snake. But yeah, we do see some. One of my really good running mates, Jason, is another ecologist, so we're often bouncing things off each other. But yeah, like in the early morning winter runs and running along, listening to powerful owls duetting around Ironbark, not far from where we both live, is pretty special. That's, they're pretty iconic. Australia's largest owl, a pretty iconic species, and just, they seem to be making a bit of a comeback, which is good. They're listed as vulnerable under the Queensland state legislation. And, when Jason and I started our careers as ecologists 30 years ago nearly now, they were really, really uncommon, but they seem to have adapted to that kind of urban fringe environments, and they seem to be making a comeback in those parts of the world. And now it's not uncommon, to hear them around Bunyaville and Sanford Conservation Park and Enoggera Reservoir and places like that now, which is really good to see.
Excellent. And I guess with your job as well, and doing some trail running, as you said, you are actually getting to listen to the different bird calls or different animal calls, so you can actually identify what's around in that environment, and knowing that it is becoming more populous than what it was previously, which is a fantastic thing. And I do know that when we've been at Parkrun, I'll be like, hey, Steve, what's the name of that bird that's been calling out? And you'll be straight on to it. So it's always lovely to have a chat to you about that sort of stuff, which is great.
Steve.
Yeah. Sorry, you go, Tone.
No, sorry. It's hard to get a word in with Tara on fire tonight.
She hasn't even been drinking either.
No.
Just water. Just water.
Yeah. So you're an ecologist, and that's amazing. But you also mentioned that you travel quite a bit with that line of work. How do you keep your training going whilst traveling for work to the extent that you do?
Yeah, that's a really, it's a difficult issue, Tony. I think I try and, because we often, because I do the wildlife side of the business, and so we often work split shift. So we work a morning session for kind of 4 to 6 hours, have a break in the middle of the day, and then work an evening session for another 4 to 6 hours. So often our break when we're away is in the hot part of the day. So if we're staying in a location that's got a gym, I'll try and get some kilometres done on a treadmill. Otherwise, and we're often in very warm parts of Australia, Cape York, North Queensland, Northwest Queensland, and you try and wait and squeeze in 4 or 5 Ks when it's cool enough that you're not absolutely going to fry yourself just before we have something to eat before we head out for the evening work. But it's, look, and that's probably one of the factors why I haven't stepped up from like a 50K runs to like 100K runs, because it just breaks your training. And you kind of, I find that when I'm away for work for a couple of weeks, and we tend to do, we're not away for 3 or 4 days, it tends to be like 2 or 3 weeks at a time, I can kind of just manage to maintain a fitness level or thereabouts, but I'm not improving, which is what if you're leading up in that kind of 8-week period prior to a big race, you do really want to be kind of on the upward trajectory in your training block. And that is difficult to achieve working away.
And something which I find interesting is fueling. So how do you fuel, how does fueling change for trail running, and does it change according to the distance you're doing? So would you fuel differently for a shorter trail run versus a longer one?
I think the primary difference this year is that, like, for trail running to road running, is like for the comparable distance, you're out there longer, because of the elevation and the terrain. It probably, and it's very individual. People find what works for them and what their gut is able to handle. And there does certainly, in the longer distances, you do need to train your gut to some extent. And some people, will go fine on doing nothing but gels. But some people will, and, I think when you're out there for kind of 7-8 hours, you need more than gels. You need something a bit more substantive. So I always find, for me, what I've just found trial and error, what works for me, and I'm pretty blessed with a pretty hard stomach, I can take most things, is like little pieces of fruit like watermelon, half a banana, simple carbs, and salt. So maybe some potato chips, and maybe some lollies, and that's pretty much it. I can keep going on that for quite some time. But there is, and then the other aspect of that is your how much you're sweating, and you really have to be, because you're out there for that long, you can really get yourself into some mischief if you're not really really cognizant of your hydration and your electrolytes. And so I did think there's a really, really good book written by an Australian guy, Daryl Griffiths, called Sweat, Think, Go Faster. And he really delves into that balance of electrolytes, and people's sweat rates are different from individual to individual, and the concentration of sodium in your sweat varies from individual to individual. So there's lots of products on the market that are a combined kind of nutrition and, so carbohydrates or calories and electrolyte. And his kind of his idea that he's putting forward is that they're great for the average person, but if you happen to be outside of that, you can get yourself into trouble if that's what you're relying on for both. You're coupling together your hydration or your electrolyte balance and your nutrition, And so if it's really hot and you need to be taking on more electrolytes, so you're taking more of those drinks that are not pre-mix, but you mix up those powders, you can get into trouble then with your gut because you're taking on too many calories and your gut can't handle it.
Yep, 100%. I agree that there is some that one size doesn't fit all, and unfortunately, if you listen to the manufacturers of all these products, they're all the Wonder Foods or the Wonder Gels or the Wonder whatever, and I agree they don't suit everybody. So you got to find the right one for you.
No, it's trial and error. What works for you?
100%. That's it. Now, I know we're running out of time here, so I'll just quickly ask you a question, Steve. What do you do to motivate yourself when things get tough, either in training or during a race?
1 foot in front of the other, Tim. Just keep going.
You've started, don't stop.
It's the only way to the finish line, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, and that's...
Yep.
No, and I think in those longer events, everyone is going to have tough moments. Like you guys, and that's, I think a marathon, a road marathon is often tougher than a trail event, because on a trail event, you'll get to a hill and you go, right, I am really cooked. I'm looking forward to walking this hill, and you'll get to the top and go, well, I'm still really cooked. I'm going to walk down the other side as well. Whereas a marathon, you're basically running at threshold for the length of the event.
Yep.
Oh, Steve, you haven't seen me run a marathon recently, have you? No, it is true though. It is in trail running you do have a lot more of a relaxed feel about it. Whereas road running, you're like, everyone's passing you and you're like, oh, I've got to keep up with them. Whereas trail running, everyone's sort of walking up that hill. So it is much more relaxed.
It's all about watching your pace per kilometre. Have I met my target?
Yeah.
Did I get where I wanted to? Whereas trail running, you throw the watch away. Essentially, it's meaningless. Kilometres don't mean anything because every kilometre is totally different than the previous or the next.
Yeah. So your pace is so inconsistent in a trail event because you're going up and down, uphill and down dale kind of thing. But it's also like, I think there was I heard an anecdote, a story from a trail running podcast that I listened to, where the presenter was talking about, she was at a checkpoint and a lady came in and going, I'm done, I'm cooked, I'm withdrawing. And the volunteers at the checkpoint said, okay, no worries, what's your name, what's your bib number, everything. And it's probably going to be 3 hours until we can get somebody to give you a lift back to the start finish area. And she was like, I'm going to just keep going then. Put a hydration vest back on and just finish the event.
That's it.
Well, it's better than sitting around waiting, isn't it? She's like, oh, well, if I can't get back to where I want to be, I might as well just get myself there. So,
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's a perfect way to do it. So anyway, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. This time has gone really, really fast, and it's probably because I'm talking through most of it. But for all of our listeners who want to know more about trail running, this has been just a bit of an intro for you guys. Steve is a very, very good trail runner. So if you've got any questions, please make sure you put them in the notes and we can ask Steve and make sure that that's answered for you. But before we finish up, we're going to ask the Fast Six, which we ask all of our guests. So we'll get Tony to do that. And Tony will actually do Fast 7 next year with Sydney coming up. But I'll hand it over to you, Tony, to explain the rules to Steve.
And Tara, I did mean that as a compliment that you're on fire. So,
Tony, look, I'm used to being bagged and trained and all the rest of it in this place, so it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. Everybody knows I talk lots. It's okay.
All right. So, Steve, as Tara said, I asked the Fast Six. So 6 fast questions, hopefully 6 fast answers, and please ignore any other noises that may come from any of the other panelists. So, all right. First up, podcast or music?
Podcast.
Best running advice given to you?
If you wouldn't run the hill at the start, if you wouldn't run the hill at the end of a trail event, don't run it at the start.
That's interesting. What advice would you give to someone starting out?
As hard as it might be, and just get out there and do it. Join a local running club. It's, when you get in there, it's not as daunting as it may seem from looking at the outside.
Excellent. Uphill or downhill?
Oh, definitely downhill.
Yeah.
Boo.
Gels or blocks?
Gels.
And your favorite shoes to run in?
I have got stupid shaped feet, so I have to run in shoes that are for hobbit feet. So I run in ultras or topos.
Excellent. Now that's a different answer to what we normally get, which is like Nike or Brooks or Saucony or something like that. So it's great to have a different brand of shoes for a change.
Yeah, very much so. Well done. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So before we finish up, we're going to get our tip from Tim. So Tim, fire away.
Yeah, my tip's an easy one. If you haven't tried trail running before, it's a lot of fun and definitely worthwhile giving it a go. You might just like it if you did give it a go. So start off with some easy short trail runs, things like park runs. There are a number of park runs like Bunyaville, where we are, which are trail-based park runs, where you can learn some of the techniques over shorter distances. You generally don't need any specialized gear when you're running the shorter distances, and you can work your way into running, as Steve said, longer and longer distances. If you do start to run trail running, it is important, I guess, that you understand that there can be some dangers with it as well. So it's important that if you are doing trail running, particularly if you're running by yourself, to tell people where you are, to set up notifications, whether it's on your Garmin watch or on your phone, where people can track where you are at all times, so that if you do fall over and hit your head or something like that, people can find you pretty easily. The Emergency Plus app is a handy app to also have on your phone, because it gives you coordinates. So when you ring 000, you can give them your exact coordinates and your locations as well. So, and even things like taking a small first aid kit if need be when you're doing your running is very handy. Mobile phone, all that sort of stuff. So give it a try. Try it at your local park run first, or in a local area where there's a short loop, and then start to work your way up from there. That's my tip.
Excellent. Nice tip, Tim. Anything you want to add to that for beginner trail runners, Steve?
I think, like, in all around Australia, all around the world, there's local trail running groups, and I know they can be daunting when you look at these people with the gear and everything, but most trail runners are a really friendly group of people, and just say hello and get along. Go and join one of their social runs.
Yeah, they're all very approachable. They're not actually as scary as they look, even with all their poles and stuff like that. They don't poke you with them. They're very nice people. So if I can trail run, and I'm pretty clumsy and uncoordinated, anyone can do it. So before we finish up this episode, we're going to hand it over to you, Lucia, and you're going to tell us what's going on for next week, if that's all right.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So as we know, Christmas is fast approaching, and next week we are going to be talking about all things we are hoping that Santa leaves for us in our Santa socks. So anything from the latest running clothes, shoes, watches, and race entries. So next week's show is all about our wish list for Christmas. It's one that I can't wait to discuss, because as we know, I do love a good bit of merch. And as usual, it's going to be another great episode in which you're not going to want to miss.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Luch. I love Christmas. It's one of my favourite times of the year, and it's mainly about the food, and then I have to go for a run to get rid of that food. But anyway, sometimes Tim's nice and buys me other things as well, like merchandise or running shoes. Anyway, that wraps up our episode for this week. But before we finish, I'd really like to say thank you to you, Steve, for coming on to our show and having a chat to us. And I hope you've had as much fun as we have listening to you. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
Excellent. No worries. I would also like to thank my marathon mates for joining me tonight. I always have fun catching up with you guys and talking all things running as well. And we'll talk again next week and chat about our Christmas Santa sack wish list. As always, we have loved recording these podcasts for you, our wonderful listeners. We love hearing your feedback, so please like this episode wherever you're listening to it and leave some comments or send us a message via our social media pages. We've got Instagram, Facebook, or Messenger, and we've also got our email address, happyrunning@flyingrunner.com. And as usual, video of this episode will be available at Spotify and YouTube. Audio will be on Apple and Amazon and most other popular podcast platforms. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Flying Runner. Until then, happy running.
Happy
running.
Happy running. Bye.